Hello, it's so nice to see you here today. It's time for another episode in my weekly exploration of what's on my arty bookshelf. And this week, week 3, happened to coincide with an arty play date that a friend of mine had organized for a group of us. We all brought our own projects to work on, but there was a suggested project which was painting rocks on dots. Painting dots on rocks. Painting rocks on dots. I did it again. Painting dots on rocks. Sounds like something from Dr. Seuss, doesn't it? Anyway, there was lots of spotty inspiration in the room. Scrappy balls, people dotting on CDs, and feathers. Feathers, really, why not? Sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? Anyway, that's what I decided to do because this crazy art. So this book has all kinds of things in it. Lego art, camouflage body paint. Anyway, part of my plan for this project was to decide which of my books that I want to keep. And although this is a cool book, I think it's not a keeper. Folded books, cut paper, cut and torn paper, art made from cassette tapes, from plastic garbage, installation art, huge installation art, doodles, massive doodles, and teeny tiny, yes, those are normal size pencils. Somebody has carved them into shapes. Huge installations, outdoor installations, more Lego, more outdoor installations. And I've paired this with another book. This one is by an artist named Yayoi Kusama. She's a Japanese artist who's quite well known for painting dots on all kinds of things. And this happens to be a children's book that I found at a thrift shop, brand new. I couldn't believe my luck. And this one's definitely a keeper. I'm not giving this away. Well, maybe later, but not at the moment. She's a very interesting artist. One of the things that she's really well known for is painting spots on pumpkins. That's a big deal. She also does these huge installations in rooms, infinity rooms, and you can't really get the impact from just looking at a picture in a book. If you ever get a chance to see one of her installations in person, I would really recommend it. This one happens to be at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art near Copenhagen, Denmark. And being in this room, which is done with mirrors, it really is like being in space, floating in space. This other one here, I was less impressed with. It was a little bit like walking through a bunch of hanging Christmas lights, but perhaps if you're not in a place that does big Christmas light displays, you might find it more impressive. And I know you're thinking it. Yes, we did go to see The Little Mermaid. Here's a photo that I took off the lineup of people to take photographs with the Little Mermaid statue, which was boggling to me because there are statues all over Copenhagen, like this one called the Genetically Altered Little Mermaid. It's way more interesting than the other one and just a short walk away from the other Little Mermaid. Anyway, back to Kusama. This one here, her obliteration rooms, it's just an invitation to put colorful stickers on a wall, and it's very cool project, and I would encourage you to look her up. Inspired by my 2 books there, I decided to paint dots on feathers because why not? And I know there are all kinds of fancy tools for making dots, but I just have some simple dowels and this double-ended stylus. The 2 ends are different sizes, and I found that the best paint to use for this type of dotting is the really cheap dollar store acrylic paint. It's got the right consistency, and I don't have a big selection of colors because I have actually made a decision to stop using acrylic paints in my practice because, in case it's not obvious, acrylic is plastic, and every time you wash your acrylic paint down the drain, you're washing plastic particles into the waterways. So I'm going to finish up what I have here because whether I use it or not, it's still plastic in the environment, and then I'm not going to be buying any more. That's my plan anyway. So dotting, all you do is you dab a little bit of paint, not very much, right on the end of one of your dowels, and then very carefully you dab that onto the surface that you're painting. Now this is one of those meditative art processes where you are supposed to be just in the moment and focusing on the dot that you're making. And I have to tell you, I have a really hard time with this. My brain wants to plan and think ahead and decide what the next dot is. But that's not what this is supposed to be about. And my brain is rushing and thinking and planning. And if I keep doing it, I find that after a while, I do get lost in the moment. One of the things that you'll find with the dowels is you have to reload your paint after every dot. But if you're using one of these styluses, you can actually make several dots in a row, and each one gets progressively smaller, so that creates a different sort of effect. That's pretty much it. So right here, I'm just making these little rows of progressively smaller dots. And then once I feel like I've done that enough, I will change and do something else. Change colors, change tools, and all I do is the next thing, and I just keep going back and forth. While I'm dotting here, I'd like to tell you about a group of artists that I discovered when I was in Copenhagen. I happened into a private gallery, and the owner told me all about this group of artists known as the Cobra Group. The Cobra name stands for 3 cities: Copenhagen, Brussels, and Amsterdam. And this group of artists who were active in the middle of the last century, around the 1950s, they were really interested in exploring what they call primitive art made by children or people who were untrained, that were outside of the formal art system. So they were really looking for spontaneity. They used lots of really bold, bright colors, and they were more interested in the process than in the results. And I personally think that their art is really exciting, and I would encourage you to look them up. Some of the names that I learned about were Asger Jorn, Carol Apple, Constant, and Cornell. And the first 3 were some of the artwork that we saw in a place called Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, which is just outside Copenhagen. And this last one here, this one I actually saw in Montreal, and coincidentally I happened to be walking past when a docent was giving a tour, and she commented that it's an image of a face, but it's also an exploding volcano with the head sitting on top. So very interesting group of artists. They were looking at art in a new and quite fresh way, and I find their art really exciting. Oh, somebody told me about a really sweet video. It's called The Line and the Dot, and you can find it on YouTube. And I have to say, I laughed out loud several times while I was watching it. So I would look it up. I've posted it onto my Facebook page, and there's been quite a lively discussion about which character, which line, dot, or squiggle people identify with. And I think it's probably quite telling about who my friends are, where they all like the squiggle. I do too. Anyway, here's my finished feather. I hope you enjoyed this week's session, and I think next week I will move on from the dots and start looking at something else.